Welcome to the Lost Boys, the Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabriel O'Sullivan, and joining me is my co-host, Will Haycox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child, and through this production, we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. What's up, Will?
How's it going, Gabe?
Fantastic, brother. So we are on episode 5 of this series that is entitled...
Can't remember the exact title of it. We always try to come up with something catchy, but I think it's...
Leading Our Kids Well.
Leading the Kids
Leading
Well.
Our Kids Well, right. So if you hadn't gone back and checked out episodes 1 through 5, make sure that you do that. And, just a reminder that our podcast, again, called Lost Boys to Found Fathers, we've talked a lot on this show about what we said in the intro, about how do we encourage our fellow brothers who have traveled that journey of child loss. And we talked about biblical principles that relate to that. We've talked about how do we respond to that in our personal lives, in our lives with our spouses, in our lives with other kids. How do we deal with things like getting up and going to work and living our lives after such a tragedy. And we started this because we didn't feel like there was a good resource for men out there who have gone through that. And so that's why we're doing this. So again, if you've experienced that, if you've got friends or family members who've experienced loss of a child, we would encourage you to point them in this direction, because we just want to be a resource for guys to help them, to recover from that situation, and then move forward, understanding that a tragedy like that doesn't have to necessarily define you, but it helps to develop you. And so we've been there, we've done that. That's why we can say things like that. It doesn't mean that you forget about it or it gets easier. It just means that, God's going to help you to grow through it if you allow Him. So now we're kind of transitioning a bit, into leading our kids well, becoming that father that we need to be for our current kids, or even for our future kids. If you don't have kids yet, probably one day you will, either through natural birth or through adoption or foster care. And so now we want to help us, guys to develop into even better fathers. And so that's kind of where this series comes from. Anything you want to add to that, Will, before we jump into today's?
No, I'll just do a quick overview, kind of where we've been. Like you said, go back and listen to the first 4 episodes. But, we covered 1 Thessalonians 2, 11, and 12, and we talked about, how we should deal with our children, like it says there. We should be encouraging, comforting, and urging them to live lives worthy of God. So we're encouraging them, we're comforting them, so we're tender and we're loving, but also it's not just like, I pat you on the back, and regardless of what you do, I'm comforting you, and I'm being encouraging, but also there's a standard, we're holding you to, and we're pushing you to live a life worthy of the Lord. Then we talked about, Ephesians 4, 1 through 2, about being humble and gentle, patient, bearing with one another. So there's that element we talked about of not being this, commanding father. Yeah. You're demanding everything of your kids. You're the guy on the sidelines, that's grabbing you running out on the field and grabbing your kid by the arm and saying, oh, that's terrible. Why didn't you defend better? And like, you're not even the coach. You're just being a terrible parent, and you're just that guy. But being humble and gentle in the way that you raise your kids, and again, still pushing them to that standard. Then we talked about Ephesians 6:4, and last time we talked about James 3:17 through 18. So there's a lot of things there that we have seen. Let's just break a verse down, and let's talk about, what does the Lord tell us about how to be a good husband and a good father. So I'll let you take us with today's verse.
Yeah,
okay? So
we know that words are important. Okay, we talked about some of that in other episodes, like you just mentioned. And if words weren't important, I don't think God would have given us His Bible, right? And in Radio Land here, I'm holding up a Bible.
Colorful Bible too.
I know, man, super cool. I didn't do that. I don't know. It's got a bunch
man,
of
you have to have a steady hand to do that.
Pre-highlighted.
That's interesting.
I don't know what the highlights mean, but they're super cool. So God gave us His word, so we know that words are important. I mean, John chapter 1, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we want to make sure that we as men are using words that are helpful and kind and uplifting, even if they have to be stern and direct. Okay, and so we're talking about that in relation to how do we, in being a father and leading our kids well. we talked about in previous episodes not wanting to exasperate our children, but build them up. And so, good coaches, as you said earlier, good fathers, they are going to tell you like it is, but they're going to help you to, have an understanding of the fact that, hey, just because they might be talking to you in a way to direct you, they're not trying to berate you. Okay, they're not trying to talk down to you. They're trying to help you understand where you are and then build you up. And that's what we want to be. Like, we don't want to be guys that are tearing someone down. We want to be guys that build our kids up. And now, does that mean that we're always telling them everything they do is great or it's awesome? No, of course not, because that would be setting them up for failure in this current situation and later in life. We don't want to be the parents on American Idol who think that they tell their kids they can sing when they really can't sing, right? Yeah. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be that way. But in that vein, I'm going to read Ephesians 4:29, and this is a verse that means a lot to me, and I'll kind of give you some backstory on that in a minute. It says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So, again, Ephesians 4:29, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." As a youth, I had a propensity towards gangster rap.
I can see it.
Not proud of that.
I see it.
Not proud of that, because I was, said, hey, I'm following Jesus, but I'm listening to Easy. Okay, at the same time, I don't think that Jesus would have had Easy or NWA on his playlist like I did, or Ice-T or any of those guys. And the thing that I realized as I matured in my faith, and God was like, hey, dude, that's not appropriate for you to be putting that kind of stuff in your mouth, because just like the old, your old computer teacher would tell you, garbage in, garbage out, right? Yeah. So I'm putting all this bad words and this filth and these bad images, in my brain from this music that I'm listening to, and guess how my language was on the basketball court, when I was in an intense environment. It was not. People would not have been like, man, he loves Jesus,
this guy's the greatest Christian I've ever met. Yeah,
right. That would not have been the case, And so again, I'm not proud of that, but the thing that God, again, thankfully helped me understand as I grew older, and He continued to refine me, I hope, is that, man, what comes out of your mouth, like your words that you say, really do matter. And so I think this verse really can apply to our lives at home. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways to take that, but I'll stick with at home, since that's where we're teeing this up, and maybe if we have time we can go further than that. But you think of like what the Bible says about what goes in your mouth doesn't defile you, like the Jewish ceremonial laws, whether it's pork or whatever it is that was against their ceremonial laws, that said what goes in your mouth doesn't defile you, but what comes out of your mouth does. And so I think the idea there is eating something doesn't change your relationship towards God, and it doesn't defile you and make you less worthy. But to your point, like when you're on the basketball court, or when you're talking to your kids and you're just ripping into them, or you're cussing at them, or whatever it is, that's showing that what's in your heart is being reflected there. Like, it's not like our pastor has said multiple times, like he's never met a guy who has a consistent quiet time, who's actively cheating on his wife, looking at porn every day, whatever, stealing from work, all this different stuff. And that's because, not that like reading the Bible is your pill that if you take it, life is perfect, but if you're filling your heart and your mind with the truth of the Lord, and you're immersing yourself in that, then there's, I don't want to say there's not space, but you have the counteractive force to all that temptation already in your heart and in your mind. And so if we're doing, to your point, Gabe, like we're listening to music we shouldn't be listening to, we're all watching, there's tons of shows that are super popular now. Years ago it was Game of Thrones, and I guess now, years ago, I never watched, but it was Yellowstone, I know everybody liked, and there's lots of different shows that are well-produced shows that our culture in general thinks are great, and everyone's watching them, everyone's talking about them. But for the most part, those shows, because Hollywood is what it is, and it has its own morals and set of rules and guidelines, they have nudity, they have language, they have violence, they have all these things that are filling our hearts and our minds with things that are not honoring the Lord. And whether we're going to the extreme of watching these shows with our kids and modeling to them, like, this is a cool thing for you to listen to and pay attention to, and you can say you're a Christian, but then you can spend 8 hours a week watching this particular show that's about as far away as it can get, or whether you're just watching it by yourself and letting some of that infiltrate your mind. Back to the point there, we are to lead our wife and our kids well by speaking things that are encouraging, back to some of these other verses, and are comforting and are urging them to live lives worthy of the Lord, rather than every time they come home. And my daughter's 3 now, and she's in this like phase which she's been in for kind of a year, but it's like it's gotten more like the older she gets, the more she asserts her personality and her like, no, I don't want to do that. And so if I'm I tell her to go to bed, and she goes to bed, and then she gets back up 3 minutes later or 2 minutes later. If I walk in there, I'm just like, you're the most annoying, I can't believe, you're just ridiculous. Why don't you obey? Why don't you be better? Be smarter. If you were smarter, you would understand what I'm asking you to do. That's not loving. That's not comforting. That's not encouraging. That's not, back to all these other verses we used, it's not humble, it's not gentle, it's not patient. I'm not bearing with her in love. I'm tearing her down.
That's not building her up.
Yeah, it's not building her up, but it's forcing all of the hate and the frustration in my heart onto her just to vent.
Yeah.
And so I think I'll let you take this from your experience, but building up our kids has so many implications that we can cover in a second. But if we're constantly tearing our kids down and they don't feel like they have our approval, because we might pat them on the back and say, I'm proud of you every now and then, but then if we're more effusive in our tearing them down, about how terrible your report cards are and how come you didn't listen to your mom, you're such a bad kid, blah blah blah, and then when they do something great, we're like, yeah, that's good, I'm proud of you. Like, which one are they going to remember?
Yes.
The one sentence, or like the constant attitude of berating them and telling them that they're not good enough and they can't measure up.
And there's research on that too that says that we kind of only remember the negative stuff, and so I was listening to a video this week, and this is a business video, and the guy was saying just that thing. And certainly if that's the case, then we want to make sure that even in our chastisement, right, or our correction of our children, that we're doing it in a way that builds them up and doesn't tear them down. So unwholesome talk, that could not only, we're not only talking about our language, right? We're talking about like, are our words helping our kids to grow closer to the Lord? Are we helping them develop emotionally with some emotional intelligence and some spiritual intelligence? And are the words helping to just elevate them as a whole, or are they tearing them down? And if they're tearing them down, then that's unwholesome talk, okay? Because God doesn't talk to us like that in the Bible. If we look at the way that God communicates with us, like, yes, he calls out people in the Bible on their sin, but then he says, but hey, I love you. I don't want that life for you. I want what's best for you. And that should be the attitude of our heart too, as we're speaking to our kids. So that way it actually is helpful, as this verse says, and it builds up others according to their needs. Okay, and that's a unique phrase there, because your kids' needs are going to be different than my kids' needs, right? I've got 3 kids, and each of them is going to have different needs, right? I can talk to one in one way and talk to another in another way, and their needs are not going to be being met equally if I speak to them in the same manner, tone of voice, with the same words, because of their attitudes. Like Tyson, our little one, my goodness gracious, I can say one thing like, hey, bro, I need you to brush your teeth. And he's like, I'm the worst person ever. I didn't brush my teeth. My teeth are going to fall out. You hate me. I'm like, no, dude. I just said go brush your teeth, right? Isaac, my middle one, he'd be like, I don't even care. I don't care if my teeth
care.
fall out. I'll gum a steak to death, like
just to spite
just
you,
to
Dad.
spite you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of his. He's just a tougher, exterior. I think inside he's not that way, but exterior he's just tougher, man. And then Avery, our daughter, she's 17 now. She's kind of like whatever. Like I'm just I'm gonna obey my parents because it just makes more sense, kind of thing. And she's certainly we're seeing that maturity there. So again, we want to have our talk be wholesome, and we want to have our talk to our children be helpful to build up them according to what they need, right? Because they're individuals.
And to the point, like to the last little phrase there, building each other's up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Like, if we're being honest about it, what does it benefit anyone? And if it does, who does it benefit to just ream your kids? Like, to come in, your wife says, oh, well, this one and this one have been terrible today, go deal with them. And instead of coming in, sitting down with them and saying, hey, what's going on today? Let's talk about it. And then having a stern, like to your point, God didn't always like say, oh Israel, come please, will you sit in my lap so I can pat your little head and tell you I'm sorry that you rebelled against me, and would you please come back to me? Like, no, he sent plagues and he's like wiped out 20,000 people at a time, but he did it with the intention of, I'm drawing you back to me because what's best for you is to obey me and to be guided by me and have me as your God, not running and doing your own thing. So I think we should try to have the same attitude, that we're not to strike them down and say, all right, you made this one mistake, you didn't obey your mom today, or you lied here or there, now you're the worst kid. But having that idea of like, how is it going to benefit my child with what I'm saying right now? How do I discipline in a way that is beneficial, that builds them up? And having that mindset of, how does the Lord discipline me when I screw up? And it's not, lightning comes down from heaven and burns you to a crisp, and that's the end of it. That was the last mistake, last chance you got. It's, God is loving with the way that, when we're going through hard times in our lives, we can't always pinpoint, this is a punishment and this is not, and I don't even know that it works that way. I'm no theologian, but seeing that everything God does, there's a purpose behind it, and if we don't know the whole purpose, we do know that one of the purposes is to turn us back to the Lord and to help us get back on that path of honoring Him and obeying Him. And I think we should have that same mindset with our kids, that if we're going into where we're at work, and I was going to go to work for a second because it's a issue for me. I know our work situations are different, Gabe. Not that everyone here is perfect and never says anything they shouldn't say, but I work in construction, and so there's my project team, all the trade partners, the subcontractors we use. If you've ever been around construction crews, it's not the most it's not flowery language, and everybody's quoting Shakespeare, if you know what I mean. It's
if they were,
crude
I'd be
jokes.
Worried maybe about
Be kind of weird. It'd be kind of fun though if everyone was just like, look, yonder the light breaks or whatever. I don't know. I don't know my. Yeah, that would be weird. Everyone would come on the job site. What did you drug these guys with?
That's right.
But no, it's coarse language. It's a lot of sexual jokes, or just like ribbing somebody, or pranking, or just like being a jerk to one guy because you don't like him, you don't think he's smart, or just a ton of cussing and things like that. So if you're in that type of job, whether you're a construction worker or you're a lawyer, whatever your work environment looks like, you got to build some barriers in your life where you're not bringing that home. Like you're not thinking about and totally wrapped up in the mindset, the words, the way of talking and relating to each other. Like, because you can. And guys should know this, like you and I, Gabe, or me and some of my other buddies, like we can give each other a hard time, and talk about like, Gabe, why'd you put that hoodie on? It makes you look like, an Oompa Loompa.
Like
and
you,
like, because we both have
Clemson
orange Clemson hoodies. We didn't coordinate this. But like, I could give you a hard time, and it's like, it's from love, and like, that's how we express that we like each other. Yes. If I go home and tell my wife, like, why'd you wear that? It makes you look like this. I'm probably going to call you right back and say, hey, Gabe, can I sleep at your house tonight?
That's true.
So, like, there's, intuitively, you can talk to some people in a different way than you can talk to others. Yeah. So why don't we always act that way with our kids? I can be a project manager and order people around and make them do this and make them do that because I'm placed an authority over them at work. I try not to do it that way, but I can. And then if I come home and try to demand the same thing of my 3-year-old that I do of a 53-year-old guy, it's not going to work well, first of all, and it's not going to give her the impression that I love her, I'm trying to build her up, and then I'm trying to benefit her. It's just like, why is Daddy yelling at me and telling me what to do? So I think there's tons of things. We could spend 2 or 3 or 4 episodes on this, but I think the overall idea is, let's love and try to be fathers like the Lord is to us.
Yes.
And the Lord doesn't come down on us with unwholesome talk and berating us and then ask us to do what's more convenient for him. He fills his book with words that build us up, that give us what we need, and that benefit us and those that we carry the word to.
Yeah, that's so good. Like his whole lean is towards obviously giving himself glory because he's the only God and he is worth that glory. But in that, he's doing and saying everything to us, like you said, for our benefit because he loves us because we're his children, just like we love our children, right? And he created us. We are his workmanship, the Bible says. So he cares for us, right? Like it's not something he just, nobody's an accident, even if your parents told you that. Everyone is created for a purpose, and on purpose by God. And what you were saying earlier made me think of the John Eldridge book, Wild at Heart. I don't know if you've ever read it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. I've read that book probably 5 times, 6 times in my life. And he uses a lot of scripture, a lot of good stuff. There is probably some pop psychology stuff in there too. One of the things where he talks about the wound of the father, right? And he's like, you have to go back and think about what did your dad say to you that screwed you up? What did your mom say to you that jacked up your brain, and that's why you are the way you are, kind of now or whatever. So he kind of has you do these exercises to think about that. And again, that's why I say there's that pop psychology aspect to it. And it's one of those things I wish I would have never read that because now every time I say something stupid to my kids, I'm like, oh man,
that's going to be the
that's
thing.
The one.
Yeah.
That's the one they're going to
just ruin their whole lives.
And then I make it worse because then they're like, you shouldn't have said that to me. And I'm like, yeah, tell it to Oprah one day. Like, that's my rebuttal, and that's not okay. Like,
tell it to Oprah.
I should. And
tell it
like,
to Mari.
Who's Oprah? Yeah. Right? And I'm like, okay. Sorry.
There's more than 7 channels now. Yeah.
That's right. Go there and turn the dial to channel 4.
Click. Yeah.
So that's my bad parenting there. But so we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to have our kids to look back on us and be like, oh, there's this one time that my dad said X, Y, or Z to me, and it, now it turned me into a meth addict, whatever the case may be. So using a little hyperbole there, I hope, but even so, recognize that our goal is to build up our children. Our goal is to have wholesome talk come out of our mouths. Our goal is to help to build them up and encourage them, even in our correction or our rebuke or our chastisement. We need to do it in a way that's honoring of the Lord, right? We can't go to them and be like, your mistake dishonored you and dishonored God and dishonored our family, and then allow our handling of how we correct them on that mistake to also dishonor God and ourselves and our family, because that's just setting a bad example. And so we want everything that we say, we want it to somehow benefit those who listen. And again, that's gonna we have to be sensitive to those that we're leading, be it our children or our wives or people at work, as to what are their needs and how can what I'm saying build them up. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anything else you got on this topic, man?
No,
I think
like I said, there's a lot we could
say in here. Yeah,
there's a lot more we could say, but without going off on a whole other tangent, let's maybe save that one for another day.
For the next time,
sure.
Yeah. So thank y'all for joining us today. Make sure that you follow Lost Boys to Found Fathers on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out my books online. That Will Be Done, Trusting God in the Midst of Pain, Suffering, or Loss. You can find that one on Amazon, digital or softback. Is that what you call them? Softcover, softback?
Softcover, yeah.
Something like that. And then also the newest one, Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. You can find that on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com or Apple Books as well. Digital or softcover, softback, whatever you called it right there.
Not hardback. Yeah.
Not hardback. There you go. So thank y'all again for joining us. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.